Going back, if you haven't got the tone of the top right, Bimal mentioned at great length, training. If the employees don't believe the tone from the top, and if they think that the business is corrupt, they will act corruptly. So, frankly, it's worth 100 compliance procedures if you get the tone from the top right, the leadership is on board. It will work much better than if it's not. I know to a degree, I said, look, how much has changed? If we're going in the right direction, how much do we really need to do? And I'll sort of finish off with a thought on that. Doing nothing, I don't think, is an option, even for those of you out there who are unblemished, without a stain of your character and the rest of it, and looking out upon you. There probably aren't that many of you like that. So I think that what we don't want is window dressing. There has to be substance, but there is a question around, okay, we thought about the risk, we've got the ethical procedures in place, the board are in line for it. What else do we need to do? Do we need to tighten up due diligence in arrangements with partnerships? Do we need to think about what's in our contracts with suppliers? These are all worthwhile thoughts, but it all has to be in that risk context. I think fifth thought, things go wrong, as we all know. So you need to have a plan, disciplinary procedures, violations, the red flags that Elizabeth referred to, need to be investigated. You might even want to build up contingency plans in advance, as you might do for major frauds, because it's important for disciplinary sanctions to be there in the event of people being caught with, as you would with hands in the till, similarly with hands paying money over against corporate objectives and mores. And I think, that as part of this, and one of the interesting discussions, and it may well be a question that comes up later about the SFO has been really banging the drum on self-reporting and what a good thing it is and how we should all consider it. The minute we find any problem in the business, they will listen to us kindly and they will, take a proportionate response. I take that point entirely. It's important for us as firms to act honestly and openly. It's in our regulatory obligations and the FSA. But my point, I think, would be before you decide to waltz down the yellow brick road to the SFO, speak to your lawyers first and get all your ducks in a line. So to a degree, if I just talk very quickly and just give you a few one-liners on, say, what we are doing as a business in terms of trying to move this forward. So at the second half of last year, put in place a review program to go out and talk to people about where they were from a bribery and corruption perspective, what procedures were in place, and just to get a view, I think, on a high level of where we were and what were the major gaps. Now, as part of that, we reported back to the board, and I suppose, in a way, if I just put it in a sort of 3 sentences, I'd say, sentence 1, yeah, our businesses have ethical values, and for the most part, do pretty well by them. Sentence 2, we've got a lot of controls pointing out about people trying to bribe us. So gifts and entertainments, we've got very, very good whistleblowing arrangements in some jurisdictions which are heavily used, and we do get reports on kickbacks, and we do act against them, which is good. And we enforce it, and we make the point to staff that's enforced in some jurisdictions. So all good things, all ticks in the box. On the other side of it, if you then take it as a whole, and it differs from firm to firm, but if you look at it in the round, we do tend to think of this problem in the context of people bribing us. And this won't be unique to us. If I talk to a lot of firms, it's very similar. It's all about, we wouldn't possibly. How could we? We're good people. We can, and so the controls tend to be sort of about us our people receiving kickbacks and us making bad decisions rather than the other way around. So, having gone to the board and said, right, here's a high-level view. There's some other more sophisticated messages, but that's about the gist of it. We then said, okay, what are we going to do? So what we've done, and we're pushing it through this year, and it is a lot of work in a firm this size, is to say, what are the risks to us? What do the businesses do? How far out do we want to look at this? So we're really trying to get right into the nitty-gritty in the far ends of our firms, because we do some quite exciting things in places. What do we do? Where do we do it? What controls are in place? And I think at the top of it all, what's the tone from the top? What's cultural leadership? And we're going through that. The next part of that is looking at the adequacy of controls facing up against that. And I think the final part of that is getting the local chief executive officers to sign off against the statement about risk, the statement about controls, We're quite happy for gaps to be reported. We're also quite happy for instances to be reported of things that have gone on, because if we don't bring all these things into the open now, they won't get into the open at all. And again, we'll go back to group board, we'll put an assurance programme in place in terms of monitoring it, making sure that the sort of risk assessment's up to date and making sure we continue to enforce it. Now, this is a lot of work, but there's a couple of thoughts which is, I think, I'll leave you with. One, there's lots of synergies in this space. There's synergies with anti-money laundering. You've got due diligence, you've got politically exposed persons. It fits in really well in that space. There's the anti-fraud controls, and there's a whole piece around solvency too, so your financial controls. Ethics, banged on about ethics for a while, so you've got training, you've got the culture, you've got enforcement, all very important. Communications, whistleblowing, these are all in the same space. General business, so if I speak to somebody and say, if we pick up a piece of institutional pension business, what due diligence do we do in this jurisdiction? We do quite a lot, because from an actuarial perspective, we want to know what the mortality rates are and the rest of it. It's not that hard to add another 1% on the top of that and say, actually, do you mind doing a bit of this and a bit of that to identify if there are any ethical problems with this firm in the past? So a lot of this is around work, in a way, to prove that we comply with something that we're already going a long way towards complying. As I said before, there is a degree of polishing of this and to make sure it's coherent, and so there are bits of mortar, if you like, with the building bricks, and there is a lot around getting these gaps together. But if there's one thing I would say at the end of it is all about culture and it is all about substance. If there's no substance, if it's all about box ticking, it won't work.